Hey guys, welcome back to the show today. Today I have a pretty special topic. We've been talking about self sabotage as physical therapist assistants, and I've got a specialist here that treats self sabotage, and she does it in a natural and holistic way. So I'm excited to chat with her today about everything self sabotage, some of the things that maybe we do that we're unaware of. We're going to open this up for discussion and hope you find this information helpful. So, Kathy, welcome to the show today.
Thanks, Kim.
If you don't mind, I'm going to let you introduce yourself because you have a unique title and you do something that is unique and therapeutic and helpful. So, if you don't mind, kind of let us know who you are and what you do.
Absolutely. So, my name's Kathy Harlow, and I do an emotional release and balancing technique that I was trained for through a certification program. And it uses kinesiology testing or muscle testing to help assess what's going on with someone's subconscious level that is affecting their beliefs and their behaviors. So, and I then coach that person through those beliefs and behaviors into something different that's more productive, healthy, and also creates a situation in which they can have greater happiness and success in their relationships as well as in their career choices.
Yeah. And I tell you guys, you don't even know that you have these self limiting beliefs. They could be from childhood or whatever. And Kathy will pull them out of you, and you're like, oh, I kind of do feel that way, but I had no idea.
Yeah, it's really interesting because sometimes these beliefs get started for us even before we have the ability to remember them. So oftentimes these beliefs will get and these behaviors will get ingrained in us 0 to age 3. So our ability to remember things about our lives from 0 to age 3 is pretty limited. We may remember very significant snippets, but otherwise that time frame in our life is pretty blank. So, but interestingly enough, it is very formative to our belief systems and our behaviors. And behaviors come predominantly.
Very interesting.
Yeah, and behaviors come predominantly from our subconscious. So people have a false belief that I consciously think about my behavior. But unless we train ourselves to do that, we really don't. Most of our behaviors come directly from the subconscious.
So, talk a little bit about what subconscious is and what conscious is, because I don't know if people understand the difference in that.
Yeah, sure. So conscious means I'm in my conscious brain. So I'm in consciousness. So I'm clear. I'm using my cognitive abilities. So conscious means I'm using cognition. So I'm using my intellect. I'm using my sense of reason. I'm using my sense of debate, right? I'm able to process things in my consciousness. Subconscious comes from a different place. It's kind of a tape that's running all the time under the surface. And I may be hearing it, but I may not be consciously aware that I'm hearing it. And so oftentimes it's reading to me my beliefs. It's telling me what behaviors. Anytime I'm in a situation where I feel like I'm being threatened or I'm at risk, the subconscious is going to completely take over my behavior. That's the way it's set up neurologically. Because when I'm feeling at risk, the body assumes that there isn't time to process 6 or 7 different choices because we have to go quickly. So the conscious brain that wants to process 6 or 7 different choices and wants to analyze and wants to intellectualize all those different options, there isn't time for that if my body feels like it is at risk. So it will switch over to the subconscious brain, which usually only offers us 2 options. So that's why they call it fight or flight, because when we're in that space, there are generally 2 options being offered to us.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So let's kind of reel it into just professional. So as a group of PTAs, many PTAs are burnout. They're burnout in our profession. They're burnout in the productivity standards. They're burnout in the fact that they can't treat a person the way that they feel like they need to treat a person. And
Mhm.
we're very much patient advocates, and we expect that the insurance company is supposed to pay for everything. And we're almost angry at the insurance company because they're not paying what we expect, for them to pay. So because of that, and combined with our, lower income, we can get burnout really easily in our career. Tell me how self-sabotage plays into those feelings and those emotions.
Yeah, so combining all of those things together really puts the body into a space of conflict. So intellectually, you're thinking, oh, I'm here to serve the patient, and I want to give this patient the best care possible, and I want them to get back to whatever the patient has a capacity to get back to. And so that's intellectually what you want to provide for your client, because as your patient orientation comes in, that's the reason you go into such a profession, right? It's to help people get better. Then you get limited at your capacity to do that because of the way the system works. And so now I'm in a conflict in my integrity. And so conflicts in my integrity can actually put me into this type of fight or flight response because my integrity is at risk. So I'm not physically at risk, but a risk factor still is present. And so in our really stressful world today, our physical well-being does not have to be at risk to get us into a place of a fight or flight response. Any aspect of ourselves can be at risk, and that can move us into this fight or flight scenario. So when we get into a situation where we feel in fight or flight, but our true physical well-being isn't actually at risk, we will respond as if it is. And so those behaviors look out of alignment with the actual situation that's going on. And those behaviors that are triggered by that fight or flight response can be very self-sabotaging because we're overreacting. We're responding with an intensity that says my well-being or my survival is at risk, except it actually isn't. But when you're going into a workplace day after day after day after day where it feels your integrity is at risk, then you're constantly staying in this place of elevation. So your fight or flight response is high. So you're producing more cortisol. You're exerting more energy than you would need to. And so that's going to pretty quickly add to a burnout or add to your burnout scenario and make you feel burnout pretty quickly. You're going to go home, you're going to try to come down from it, but then you also may have trouble sleeping because you're in that conflict in your subconscious. So your subconscious cannot rest, which is a requirement for sleep. And so that can also add obviously to the feelings of burnout.
Love it. Love it. So self-sabotage, it isn't that you're purposely sabotaging. You may be unaware that you're doing anything at all, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, not very many people go around going, well, I'm just going to intentionally self-sabotage myself today. So people don't consciously go around thinking that, right? So this is coming from an ego space saying you are at risk. So you must do something to protect yourself. And while the ego is telling us to do something, we have to do something to protect ourselves. Protection doesn't sound like self-sabotage. However, when it's in a response to a fight or flight, when I'm at risk, my ego's probably only giving me two options. And usually neither one of those options are great because both of them are going to usually they'll look like a complete overreaction to the situation, or it'll look like complacency. It will look like I'm doing nothing. So it's either an overreaction or almost kind of a making myself small, hiding away from what the actual conflict is, especially when I feel like there's not a resolution, which I'm sure a lot of your PTAs feel like there's not a resolution because they don't have control over the system.
For sure. That's a huge part of it. And then when they find out there's an opportunity, then they start that I think the ego comes in a little bit, and you can explain this because I don't understand it, what's going on consciously or subconsciously. But let's say, okay, now finally, they've researched and they have found something, and that something does answer their question. And now that fear starts kicking in, like, oh, if I do this, what if I fail?
Absolutely, because they're still operating in that fight or flight. And so even something new may feel like a threat because there's a saying, right? Better the devil you know than the devil you don't, right? Well, that's a saying for a reason, because once we get used to the threat that's ever present for us in a day-to-day basis, we start to just accept it on some level, that threat is there. And then it becomes normalized. And so then I just keep dealing with it day after day and go, well, I can do this, right? We psych ourselves up for it every day. Well, I can do this. What choice do I have? I need this paycheck. How will I survive without it? And so then when someone says, oh, look, you could go over here and we could be doing this completely differently, when we're still in that fight or flight mode, I'm in extreme skepticism and distrust of anything that would allow me to come out of that fight or flight response, because now I've gotten used to being in hypervigilance.
And then how do you, even with your techniques, how do you get someone out of that so that they're not in their conscious mind and reacting in a way that maybe isn't the way that they need to act for their future? What techniques do you use, or kind of like what are the things that you would do to help someone in that way?
Yeah. So ultimately, first thing is becoming aware of what's got you into that space where you're in that fight or flight response. And then really being able to name that and assess the actual risk factors. So really getting your body to understand, oh yes, my integrity feels at risk, but I'm not actually physically at risk of not surviving. So really coming to terms with what is the actual risk and how do I address that so that I can eliminate it, right? And how do I feel safe in the process of that, of going, oh, okay, yes, this isn't a risk to my integrity, but I'm going to be safe physically. And that helps us come down out of that fight or flight response where I'm like, oh, remember, body, we're not really responding to a threat to our actual physical survival. We're only responding to a threat to our integrity. And so helping people coming to terms with that. Okay, now if I'm only looking at a risk towards my integrity, how do I fix that? And it feels a little safer to take steps to fix the risk against my integrity than it might feel to fix a risk against my physical survival.
Yeah, for sure. Because you can now go, okay, if it's my integrity, what components of this job are making me feel the way that I feel, that are crossing sort of my boundaries? And then, is this something that I can live with and learn from and grow from? Or is this something that, I know I have to make a change from? Because even though it's not life or death, it may be something that's coming up from you. And then, it takes that one thing to flip that switch and you're done. And again, you're flipping back into that fight or flight mode.
Right. Absolutely. So yeah. So also helping people prioritize what's really important to them. Because again, when we're really in that heightened fight or flight stage, it's difficult to even do that. It's difficult to prioritize what is important to me. Is it important that I make $2 more an hour over here, even though it's threatening my integrity every day? Or would I be willing to take $2 less an hour over here, which I'm not going to be in that conflict? What is that going to equate to me in my life? Does that have other value for me somewhere else in my life? Is that something I'm willing to assess? Are there possibilities of getting those $2 an hour back in some other way that wouldn't be causing me this type of unrest, burnout, self-sabotage that's going on in my current situation? So helping people get into their conscious brain, into their intellectual brain, into their rationalizing brain, so that those types of checks and balances can be looked at from an objective place.
I love that you say that, because, I feel like when I speak to a lot of PTAs right now, many of us are helper personalities. So we go into the field because, we don't know how to dig internally, but we do know how to help someone else, because that is a lot easier, right? If I help you,
Absolutely.
I can avoid, I can avoid me.
Absolutely. So yes, oftentimes, like in I think all fields that are patient based, right, and trying to help, when we're going into it from a space of really having a desire and a longing to help other people through their pain and suffering, oftentimes it causes an avoidance to our own, and it's really a normal coping mechanism. It's not a super healthy one, but it's a normal one. It's one that many people use. And so they just go, well, I'll ignore my pain and suffering, and as long as I'm alleviating someone else's pain and suffering, I'll be okay. It's false. But
which is a self-limiting belief.
It is a self-limiting belief, because I can help other people with their pain and suffering and also be capable of alleviating my own pain and suffering. They aren't exclusively separate from each other. There's nothing that says I have to do one and then can't do the other. So that's a limiting belief, saying I have to do one, and so something has to be sacrificed so it'll be mine. That is a self-sabotaging, limiting belief.
And I find that a lot in our field, that that PTAs do that. We don't know we're doing that, because
Right.
it is easier to help someone else. But I also see us looking at undervaluing ourselves.
Absolutely. So when I tell myself, right, in some subconscious space, again, and these things, these ideas about myself are generally formed in our very, very pre-verbal years. So when I believe that, and it has a lot to do with our family dynamics and what role I'm playing within my family unit. So if I've always been the caregiver in my family, and everyone in my family sees me as a caregiver and gives me value through that space, then I'm going to want to continue to get that validation even once I've left my nuclear family. And so I'm going to seek out those same types of validations out in the world, because those were the validations I've been getting since I was very young. So, but my family may have seen me as a caregiver and also not given back to me at the same level because they weren't caregivers. And so then I become accustomed to giving my care out to other people, but not receiving anything back for myself. And it puts us in an extreme deficit of constantly having to give out, and believing that that's a requirement of myself to have value, but not really knowing how to receive care for myself back. Because that I wasn't taught how to do, because my family didn't do it.
Right. And I think we find that a lot, especially, I think in society today, we learn more about feelings, emotions, what they are, what our conscious mind is, what our unconscious mind. I mean, back when I was younger, it was just do this and do it because I said so.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. And when I'm, yeah. And when I'm 3, 4, 5, 6 years old, I don't really have a lot of options. I'm not really given a lot of choices, because these people who are telling me to do it, I need them for my survival. And that's how it gets rooted in a belief around our survival. Because at that time, my capacity to care for those people was rooted to my survival. Because I thought, if I don't make them happy, then they may not provide for me. If they aren't providing for me, then I don't know how I would survive, because I'm 5. I can't survive on my own. And so that's how those things get linked to a belief that these things are a requirement for my survival. And we don't question it. We just keep living our life that way, because we don't remember how that belief got started.
No, I've worked with Kathy before, for those of you out there, and Kathy brought some things out, and really, I had no idea. I think there were times that you were like, well, what happened when you were like 4 years old? And I'm like, I don't know. Because there was something that you were seeing, and I had a lot of self-limiting beliefs that we had to work through, and when I worked through those, I was able to not have fear. I was able to gain confidence. I was able to gain clarity around things, because I didn't have, all of my time, thinking about, okay, I couldn't discern things because there was just so much going on. It was just sort of at a subconscious level.
Yes. Yeah. So many times there are too many things going on for us to really understand. And there's a real questioning process that we can go through with ourselves that I teach people how to do as well. And so it's not something that we're taught to do. We aren't really taught to question our belief systems. We aren't really taught to do that. And the only time we usually ever do it in our lives is through those teenage angst periods, right? Where we want to defy against something. And I make it really clear to people that defiance is not the same as questioning a belief system. A defiance, when I'm defying against something, I'm just making sure that whatever someone else wants me to do or wants to get from me, I don't do or they don't get. That's defiance. I never, in any of my defiance space, ask myself, what do I really want? That never comes up. So even when we go through those teenage years, we may defy against something else and not get any closer to what I actually want and need in my life than I was when I was doing what everyone else wanted me to do. Because a defiance isn't a true questioning process. It just says it's the opposite of whatever you're saying. I'm going to do the opposite of whatever you want me to do. That's not a real questioning process. So we aren't really taught to just go in and say, hey, if no one else had any influence on me at all, what would I want and need? And it's a really scary thing for people to do because they've never done it.
So you talk about how you break things down for people, and there are 7 things that you do that they can break down. Let's kind of go over what briefly those are, and just kind of short bits and why they're important.
Yeah, so it's really allowing myself to start to question why I believe something, why I have a certain behavior. And that's really step 1, right? Of going, okay, I'm going to allow myself this questioning process. And that can bring up a lot of uncertainty. And so then it's really coming into a space of going, okay, I'm going to question my beliefs. I know that's going to make me feel uncertain about my future, but that's okay because I'm going to start to move through these different beliefs. And I've gotten to a point in my life where I know that it's not working for me, right? So I need to start getting to the bottom of why it's not working for me and how I can move through that. Then that next step can be really hard for people because once I realize, let's say you're 42 and you decide, okay, this isn't working for me. Now all of a sudden I have to recognize that I've had a belief or a behavior for 42 years that hasn't been working. And I'm just now questioning it. And so that can be super difficult to face. And look back on my life and go, oh my gosh. So if I would have asked myself why I believed this way long ago, I would have been in a totally different place. So then there's an aspect of being able to have grace and forgiveness for yourself that you were never taught to question your belief system. You were never taught to question your behaviors. And so the reason you didn't do it up until now is not because you're an idiot. You didn't do it up until now because no one told you it was a requirement. No one told you it was the right thing to do. As a matter of fact, society influences us to really stay stuck in our belief systems. Our parents want us to believe like they believed. So it is what is reinforced to us to just stay where you are. Don't ruffle any feathers. Don't make any waves. Just put your head down and get things done, right? And so that's what the programming really is. So we have to have grace and forgiveness for ourselves that we have been programmed to do things in a certain way and we just did it that way. Right. And at whatever point that I recognize that wasn't going to work for me is day one. So I move forward from that first day that I realized, you know what, this isn't working for me anymore. And now I know what I need to do to move forward from that. So really getting to that place can be difficult, of being able to forgive myself for all the time spent doing it a way that wasn't working for me. So that's two of the steps that I kind of take people into, to get to the point where, okay, now I'm willing to look at some of these behaviors that don't serve me. I'm willing to forgive myself and have grace for myself for how long I've been doing them. And then what would serve me better? Moving into step 3, recognizing, okay, what's going to serve me better out of this? And how can I change what I believe? Or how can I change my behavior so that it gets me more of what I want and need? Then implementing those behaviors also can be challenging, because our instincts will be to go back to the behaviors that we've known for 42 years. They're deeply ingrained. And so it's a slow process of adding new beliefs and new behaviors in one at a time so that I can manage those changes. Then being able to accept those failures, because I will fail. Because my instinct is to follow the behaviors I've known for 42 years. So I will fail and move and go back to the old behaviors sometimes. But I'll have more consciousness around that than just completely doing it off of a program. Now I'll be able to go, oh, okay, there it was. Man, I was super stressed and I went back to my old belief, or I went back to my old behavior. And recognizing those failures help us more and more move into a new space. Every time I fail at the new behavior, I become more and more aware of the old behavior. I get more conscious about when the old behavior shows up. So now I can see it more clearly when it does, because I recognize the situations in which it's likely to show up. So being able to have acceptance of failure. Because, yeah, you said earlier, what happens when I fail, or what if I do fail? Well, failure is an aspect of the growth process. And so I can look at that failure two ways. I can look at it like, oh my gosh, it's devastating. How am I going to get through all of this loss? Or I can just look at it like, oh, okay, I'm supposed to learn something there. So let me move forward, and figure out what I needed to learn from that situation. Because every failure has a learning aspect to it that says, oh, okay, this didn't work. So now what does? How can we move forward from that? So yeah, that's kind of the process getting started of how to start doing this.
And I think being able to discern that and do that on your own is hugely complicated. I mean, I would sit there in front of a blank sheet of paper and go, I don't know where to start. I don't know what to do. I don't know what questions to ask. And that seems really, really, really simple the way that you put it. But unless you have someone that really can guide you, it's going to be hard to go through these things and understand each of these behaviors and make and implement these changes.
Yeah, it can be really hard for someone to do it by themselves. Just because we get stuck in our own weeds and we have blinders on for our own behaviors. And so, it can be very difficult to do it alone. And caregivers, as crazy as it sounds, when caregivers show up to someone else's call, when they need help to get through something and they can't be by themselves to do it, seem to have difficulties asking someone else to help them.
Yep.
So, yes. So you, again, this isn't something we innately know. We aren't born with the capacity to do this. This is a learned skill to be able to go through this process, to go through the questioning, to go through the forgiveness, to go through the creation of the new behavior, to implement the new behavior, to forgive the failure, all these things. This is a learned behavior. This is something we have to be taught, and we have to, and it has to be tried. And it's like learning how to do math. Do I get some math problems wrong when I'm first learning how to do it? Of course I do. So it is exactly like that. It's just not anything that they teach us in school. And oftentimes our parents don't teach us because they don't know how to do it and they were never taught. And so that's why I kind of teach this cycle, this 7-step program, so that I can teach someone how to do it. They can walk away from it and then start to try it, so that they learn how to then do it on their own. Just like if I were teaching you math as a teacher, I would show you the basics of the math, and then I would send you out with your homework and expect you to practice it so that you would figure out how to do it without me standing there. And so that's ultimately the goal.
So tell people how can you do this for people over the computer?
Absolutely.
Okay. Tell these PTAs that think, I guess maybe before we go there, how would a person know that that their beliefs are limiting them, if they're experiencing burnout or if they're experiencing fear of failure? How would they know that it's their belief system?
So yeah, honestly, burnout is a huge indicator that you're in conflict somewhere between your subconscious and conscious. That burnout is absolutely a symptom of there being a conflict. So if you are reaching burnout in your profession, if you're reaching burnout in your relationships, that is a sign. That is a signal telling you that somehow, somewhere, you are in conflict. And that conflict will have to be resolved before you can truly alleviate that burnout. If your jobs always go badly, if you take a job and you have to leave, they turn out badly, you end up being in dangerous situations at your job, you end up being in bad relationships at your job. Those are all signs. If those have happened to you, everybody can get to a bad situation once or twice. But if that's happening to you over and over again, if you're struggling in jobs one after the other, that's a pretty good indicator that somewhere you have a self-limiting belief, you have self-sabotaging behavior, or you're in conflict somewhere in yourself with what you're doing. And if you just maybe just feel constantly stuck, right? Also, like, oh gosh, I would like to
hit a stuck and I don't know where else to go.
Exactly.
Yeah. Would that be also if you're fearful that, hey, I'm fearful to take a step because I'm fearful that I am going to fail?
Yes. Yes. So I think it's human nature to have a fear of failure in some way. Again, simply because we are programmed so significantly through our societal structure that failure is bad. Sometimes within our family units, our families are significantly scared of failure. So we think that there's going to be some catastrophic scenario that happens if we fail. But in reality, failure is part of growth and it is part of success. And so if I'm not willing to take those risks for failure, then there is probably some subconscious or ego idealism in my mind, in my body, that says, if you fail, you will die. And so if I'm deeply petrified of taking any risks in which I may fail, there may be an underlying belief in there that says failure equals death. And if there's a subconscious belief that failure equals death, I can promise you I'm not going to do it easily. Right? I'm not going to go, oh yeah, sign me up for a failure. Regardless of what I believe, whatever I believe the payoff might be, because no matter what the payoff is, what will it matter if I'm dead?
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
You are always such, you have so much good information. So how can a person, if they feel like, okay, I'm ready to commit to something because this burnout's driving me crazy, or failure, I have a fear of failure and I'm just totally stuck, how would they reach out to you?
Yeah, so they can reach me. The best way to probably reach me is just through reaching me on my cell phone. Um, then they can just reach out. I can send them a link to my website. They can check that out if they want. Or once they reach out to me, then I can set up a free consultation with them, and I can let them know how it would work, what steps we would take first to get them scheduled, and I can do appointments remotely, over over video call, or I can do them in person.
And in person, you do them in Blue Ash, Ohio,
Yes.
correct?
Yes,
And
that's
then
correct.
also there's one more space that you do. Where is that location?
Indianapolis.
Okay. So, yeah, guys, I would, even a free consult, if you're feeling both of these feelings and you're like, I just don't know what to do, I need something. Kathy is immeasurable when it comes to really helping you find that clarity and to get your footing back. She was an integral part of me being where I am today in business, as well as personally too. So Kathy, thanks so much for joining me today. I really, really appreciate you. We'll just end the show here, guys. I hope this information was helpful for you. Kathy, stay on right there for just a second. Guys, if you have any comments or any other topics that you want to learn, please put them in the comments below. If you like this, then please do some thumbs up, do some hearts, reach out to Kathy if you feel like you need some help. She can totally help you move forward. And we'll see you next week on the show. Thanks again for joining me.